وأقول في القرآن ما جاءت به آياته فهو الكريم المنزل وأقول قال الله جل جلاله والمصطفى الهادي ولا أتأول.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So inshallah ta'ala we're going to be resuming where we left off with the explanation of Kashf Ash-Shubuhāt by Shaykh al-Imam al-Mujaddid Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala. And the idea was that we were planning, and we say Qaddarallahu wa ma sha'a fa'al, it is the decree of Allah and He does what He wants, to be able to finish this before the second half of the dawrah. But Allah Azza wa Jal decreed that we didn't finish it, and Shaykh Abdulrahman Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he came and he taught his two books, Lamiyatul Af'al and Manzumatul Zamzami, and then now we've extended the dawrah by an extra 3 days, inshallah ta'ala. That is today, which is, if I'm not wrong, Thursday, inshallah, and tomorrow, Friday, and also Saturday. And what that means, of course, is that the regular AMAU Friday, Saturday, and Sunday Patreon classes will not be taking place this week. They will start on Friday, the 10th of September, inshallah ta'ala. So we just go back a sentence, inshallah. So if you can read for me, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ هَذِهِ الشُّبَهَ الثَّلَاثَةِ هِيَ أَكْبَرُ مَا عِنْدَهُمْ.
الحمد لله رب العالمين له الحمد الحسن والثناء الجميل وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له يقول الحق وهو يهدي السبيل وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا محمد عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أما بعد، متن كشف الشبهات. قال شيخ الإسلام ومجدد دعوة التوحيد محمد بن عبد الوهاب بن سليمان التميمي رحمه الله تعالى: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واعلم أن هذه الشبهة الثلاثة واعلم أن هذه الشبهة الثلاثة هي أكبر ما عندهم، فإذا عرفت أن الله وضحها لنا في كتابه وفهمتها فهما جيدا فما بعدها أيسر منها.
نعم. Until here, we just wanted, really, to be honest, before you go into the English, we don't really need the English for this sentence. I just actually wanted to remind us where we stopped. The Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala divided this book of his into how many sections did we say? How many did we say? I took a note from Shaykh Abdulrahman. I saw him asking the students a lot. I don't know, we won't wait for the answer on YouTube. But Uthman, what sections did we say that he divided the main part of the book into how many pieces? Was it 2 or 3 or 4? 3. It was 3. He divided the book into 3 main sections. In the first section, what he did is to give you a primer on Tawheed and Shirk. Or we can say a primer on the reality of Shirk. Now, is this primer enough? Is this kind of, if you like, summary and the core points, is it enough? Really, I would say that ideally you would have taken all of the books of the Shaykh up to this point. Kashf Ash-Shubuhāt is a book which you can teach at many different levels. I've seen it taught at a kind of a level 1 sort of level, quite a beginner's level, and I've also seen it taught at an extremely high level when a person has finished many books of the scholars and comes back to it and takes it in a lot of detail. So I've kind of seen multiple approaches with the book, but I think what is really important is at least the person has taken Kitab al-Tawheed and Al-Qawa'id Al-Arba'a, Kitab Al-Tawheed, the Book of Tawheed, and Al-Qawa'id Al-Arba'a, the 4 principles, which I believe is translated in English as 4 principles of shirk, something like that. The title is in English. 4 principles in Kitab Al-Tawheed, and then the primer the Shaykh gives you, which is the first third of the book. However, if you haven't taken those 2 books or you haven't studied them, it's absolutely fine. The primer the Shaykh gives you is more than enough to understand the text of the book. It's just more powerful if you have along with it Kitab Al-Tawheed and Al-Qawa'id Al-Arba'a. The second portion of the book, the second section of the book, is what the Shaykh calls Al-Jawab Al-Mujmal. Al-Jawab Al-Mujmal, the general answer. And we said this is an answer which is suited for every shubha that will ever come to you. A shubha in fiqh, in aqeedah, in ulum al-Qur'an, in whatever, in seerah, whatever it comes to you, somebody brings you something that is a misconception, that is to confuse you and cause you doubt, you can answer it with the Shaykh's answer, which is Al-Jawab Al-Mujmal. And in all honesty, it is Al-Fa'idatul Kabira. It is the really, really big benefit if you understand it properly, because, as we said, it doesn't cause the shubha to die. It doesn't finish off the person who spoke to you. But what it does, or the person who spread it to you, but what it does is it provides you an instant protection even if you don't know the detailed answer to the shubha. And as we've said, we are living in a time of shubuhat. We're living in a time where shubuhat spread to people more quickly than they ever have spread before. Somebody can have a shubha that, subhanAllah, might only have been known in a qarya, in a village before. And that shubha from that qarya can reach 100 million people, 10 million people, in a click of a mouse button or a tap on a phone, and that shubha has reached al-afaq, it reached the horizons. Whereas perhaps before, that shubha might have been limited to a very small number of people, a town or a village or an area or a country. But to reach everybody like that, that is the shubha, or the time that we're living in now of Ash-Shubuhāt. So to have that general answer and, sort of generic answer is very, very powerful. That you have that generic answer, and again, go back, revise it from the videos. But the basic concept is all built around the ayah in Surah Al Imran. The ayah in Surah Al Imran, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات. And you base yourself, you ground yourself on what you know to be true, and then you can repel the shubha simply because it goes against what is proven in the ayat, which are muhkama or muhkamat, which are clear and unambiguous. You don't need to know the specific answer to it, because it's just enough for you to know that what that person is saying contradicts the ayat, which are muhkamat, and the ahadith, which are muhkama, which are unambiguous in meaning. For example, a person comes and says that there is something wrong with the preservation of the Qur'an, and they mention the ahruf, and they mention Uthman's burning of some of the masahif, and they mention the qira'at, which are shadha, which you learnt about in Manzumat Al-Zamzami with Shaykh Abdulrahman. They mention all kinds of different things, and they stir it all together in a pot, and then they say, you see, these ahruf and these qira'at, and Uthman, what he did with the mushaf, and the qira'ah of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, all of this together, this Qur'an is not, don't think what you have is what the Prophet ﷺ had in terms of the accuracy and the preservation of the Qur'an. Now someone says, subhanAllah, I didn't study that book. I missed it. How do I answer this question? What happened with Uthman? Why did Uthman get rid of some of the qira'at? Why did Uthman burn the Mus'haf? What is this all about? What about the qira'at? How could someone read فَصِيَامُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ مُتَتَالِيَاتٍ فِي الْحَجِّ? How could they add a word into the Qur'an that's not in the Mus'haf? And the Shubuhāt start going, stop. Do you have an ayah which is muhkama, unambiguous, which establishes that this Shubha cannot be true? Yes, you do. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. We certainly sent down the remembrance and we will certainly be the one to preserve it. This ayah, is there any ambiguity in it? Is it possible that when Allah said that He would preserve the Qur'an, that He didn't mean preserve it completely, or He did? It's clear, right? We sent down the remembrance, we will keep it safe. Not us, not the Muslims, not the ulama, not the Qurra, not the Prophet ﷺ, but Allah Azza wa Jal Himself will keep it safe. After that, do you need now to know the answer to what is the detail about what Uthman did, and what's the situation about the qira'at, and what are the ahruf, and are the ahruf the same as the qira'at or different from the qira'at, and what about the qira'at which are shadda, which don't match the Mus'haf of Uthman, and why? You don't need to know the answer to that to begin with. What you just need to know is that Allah promised to preserve the Qur'an in an ayah which is muhkama, which is unambiguous. And the Qur'an does not contradict itself. And the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ does not contradict the Qur'an. And therefore, the Qur'an has to be preserved. As for the details about the qira'at, and are they the same as the ahruf, and what's a qira'ah shadda, and what was the action of Uthman, and why did he do it, all of that is something that you can learn later as a specific response to this particular shubha. But you don't need it to begin with. To begin with, to push the shubha away, you need to hold on to an asl, to a principle, that you have an ayah which is muhkama, it's unambiguous, the Qur'an doesn't contradict itself, the authentic sunnah doesn't contradict the Qur'an. That's the end. Whatever shubha you gave me has to be wrong. Why is it wrong? I don't have that knowledge at this moment in time. And that's powerful, because that means that you now have the ability not only to respond to those shubuhat in a way that protects yourself and those around you, inshallah, but also that you're not frightened to say to somebody, I don't know. I don't know what the detail, I don't know if the ahruf are the same as the qira'at, or the qira'at are different. I haven't studied that. I have an idea that I should probably go back and watch the explanation of Manzumat al-Zamzami and get the details out of that. But okay, for now, I don't know the answer to that. However, what I do know is that Allah said in an ayah which is muhkama, which is unambiguous, that Allah has preserved the Qur'an and Allah guaranteed its preservation. That ayah is muhkama, it is unambiguous, it has only one explanation, not two, not three, no different possibilities, one explanation, that's it. And Allah told us that the ayat which are muhkamat, hunna ummul kitab, they are the core of the book, they form the foundation of the book, the Qur'an goes back to them. And as for the ayat that have more than one possible understanding, bear in mind when we say more than one possible understanding, we said more than one possible understanding which is contradictory. The Qur'an is not contradictory, the understanding. So we have an option to understand it like this, or we have an option to understand it like this. And these options are not, we're not able to reconcile. We can't bring them all together and say, actually, this one is the same as this one. They contradict. Therefore, one of them must be right and one of them must be wrong. It's not, they can't be reconciled. One has to be right, one has to be wrong. Which one is right and which one is wrong? The one that is in line with the ayat which are muhkamat. Hunna ummul kitab. As for following the mutashabih, going after it and running after it for the sake of an interpretation that suits a particular innovation or suits a particular set of i'tiqad, this is the belief of Ahlul Bid'ah. As we said, Ahlul Bid'ati What did we say about them? يَعْتَقِدُونَ ثُمَّ يَسْتَدِلُّونَ. The first thing they do is form a belief, then they go looking for an ayah that supports their belief. And أهل السنة يستدلون ثم يعتقدون. They first, Ahl Sunnah, first they take the dalil, then they take the belief from the evidence. They take the evidence and then the belief from the evidence. It's not the other way around. Okay. That being said, when you've pushed that shubha away from yourself, is that enough? It's not enough from a couple of angles. First of all, it's not enough because you yourself haven't really put that shubha to bed. You haven't really finished it. And maybe it will settle in your heart until you keep on with that, general answer, pushing it away, but you haven't really finished the idea. You haven't really silenced it. And you haven't really silenced it from others who might not have that generic answer that you have. Also, from the point of view of the person who spread it to you, whether they are the founder of that idea or whether they're just somebody who is transmitting it across to you, or someone who's a general person who's confused about it and they mentioned it to you, also you haven't been able to give enough detail to be able to answer all of those points. What you have done is to buy yourself time by Allah's grace and by Allah's permission. You now have time where this shubha is not settling in your heart, and you can go away and find out the answer to each of those questions, knowing there has to be an answer. Even if the answer is delayed for many weeks, months, or even years, you know there has to be an answer. You know there has to be an answer. In the topic of fiqh, we talked about, for example, slavery, the existence of slavery in Islam. The fact that slavery exists in Islam, nobody can deny. It is mentioned in the Qur'an clearly. It is mentioned in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ clearly. A person says, how slavery? What is this slavery? How can it be? How can this exist in Islam? Stop. One ayah. Allah Azza wa Jalla said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ يَعِظُكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. Allah said, Allah commands you justice, fairness, goodness to others, and giving to your relatives. And Allah prohibits you from immorality and evil and oppression. That is enough. The detailed answer of what is the slavery that exists in Islam and why does it exist and what are the rulings of it and what's the fiqh of it and what's the difference between the slavery that existed in Islam and the slavery that existed outside of Islam, like slavery that was based on, for example, race or based on skin color and so on, that was never a part of Islam, nor did Islam, and Islam came to fight against that, not to approve of it. So the point is here that without all those details, just knowing that Islam is a just religion that prohibits all kinds of transgression, the ayah is muhkama. You can't have another interpretation. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adl. Allah commands you with justice. Allah prohibits you from al-fahsha, al-munkar, al-baghi, oppression against others, transgressing against others. That's enough. Now the detailed answer about the fiqh of it, what is the fiqh, does it exist today, what's the ruling of it, why does it exist, what were some of the reasons for it, what are some of the wisdom within that. I don't need to know that to start with today. I don't need to know that today. I just need an answer that will get me out of the initial problem and then go and research. And you look into the fiqh of it. And what is the difference between what Islam commanded and what Islam legislated, what Allah legislated within Islam, versus what existed outside of Islam, which is all different kinds of dhulm and oppression and transgression against other people. So this general answer is very, very powerful, and it goes even outside of aqeedah into any area of Islam, including fiqh, including shubuhāt around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, shubuhāt around the seerah, whatever it might be. You can answer it in a very comprehensive way. The third section of the book is that the Shaykh spoke about the detailed answer. Now, is the Shaykh going to give a detailed answer on slavery and the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and is he going to give a detailed answer on the Shubuhāt around the ulum of Qur'an? No, because the Shaykh here, his primer was on the topic of shirk, making a partner with Allah, in uluhiyyah, in the worship of Allah, and therefore the Shaykh is going to deal with al-jawab al-mufassal, the detailed and specific answer to the shubuhat around shirk in Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, making a partner with Allah Azza wa Jal in Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. Furthermore, is the Shaykh going to answer every shubha in Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah? You could answer yes and no. From the point of view of the Shaykh's intention, the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala intended the shubuhat that were common in his time. The shubuhat that were being spread in his time, he is going to give you jawabun mufassal, a detailed, specific answer to those shubuhat, in line with the primer that he gave you in the beginning of the book. Now, with regard to other shubuhat, in a way we can say the Shaykh never intended to gather every shubha on the topic of Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, of the worship of Allah alone. Rather, he intended to gather what was common in his time. On the other hand, shubuhat are rarely anything new. And when you look at the detailed knowledge the Shaykh had on this topic, rahimahullah ta'ala, and what he presented, you will see that there is barely any shubha today in Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, in the worship of Allah alone, except that the Shaykh has within Kashf al-Shubuhāt the answer to it. However, what is new is just different wording, just moving things around a little bit, taqdeemun wa ta'khir, putting some things forward and some things backwards, mixing between some issues. For example, the major issues that the Shaykh mentions, they might take one from there and mix them up together. But generally speaking, this book the detailed answer is going to go a very, very long way to you being able to answer in a very detailed way, in a very specific way, the shubuhat around Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. Now, in this third section, which is the detailed answer to these shubuhat, the Shaykh divided it into two parts. The first part are the three greatest shubuhat. And that's what we dealt with last lesson. The three shubuhat, which are the greatest shubuhat they have, the main ones they have. So when we go back to, it wasn't very much in terms of pages. He said here, وَأَمَّا الْجَوَابُ الْمُفَصَّلِ. So he mentioned, we don't make a partner with Allah because we testify that nobody creates or sustains or benefits or harms except Allah alone and with no partner, and that Muhammad ﷺ doesn't benefit for himself, doesn't hold for himself any benefit or any harm. That was the first one. And this one, we said, it could come to you in different wordings. Today, someone may come to you and say, I believe La ilaha illallah. They may not say La khaliqa illallah. They may say, I believe La ilaha illallah. But when you ask him, please explain to me, what is the ilah, that there is no ilah with Allah? They say, creator. And then we answer them, and that was done last lesson. The next thing is that the Shaykh dealt with, the next shubha, is that the ayat were revealed regarding the people who worshipped idols. So you are bringing to me ayat and you're using them as an evidence against my actions, which you are claiming to be shirk. But these ayat were revealed about people who worship idols. In other different wordings, people can say, I'm not an idol worshipper. How can you say that Abdul Qadir is an idol? I don't call upon the trees and the stones, whatever it might be. And this the Shaykh answered in with detailed evidences regarding proof that those people whom the Prophet ﷺ fought against, they were a people who were varied in their objects of worship, and among them are those who worshipped people, among them are those who worshipped the prophets, among them are those who worshipped the awliya, among them are those who worship the angels, among them are those who worship the jinn. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't distinguish and say, okay, idol worshippers there, prophet worshippers there, idol worshippers there, wali worshippers there. Rather, he fought them all together. And from this is his statement, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, umirtu an uqatil an-nas hatta yashhadu an la ilaha illallah, kama qal, I was commanded to fight against the people until they bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship except Allah. And here he didn't distinguish between those who called upon the awliya, those who called upon the saints and the prophets, those who called upon the angels, those who called upon the jinn, those who called upon the living, those who called upon the dead. He didn't make any he didn't distinguish at all between them. Then the Shaykh brought the third one, which is that they say, okay, but these people that you're talking to me about, you're bringing me dalil, evidences about these people, they actually wanted help from their idols. They were going to the idol for help. I'm not going to the grave for help. I'm going to the grave to ask Allah for help. That's it. And the different wordings again, say, look, I don't believe that person in the grave can do anything for me, but I'm going to them for them to take my dua to Allah, or to help my dua to get near to Allah. And we said that the reality of this, whatever they say, comes down to two things. Either they are asking Allah in that place, such that they go to the graveyard and they say in the graveyard, Ya Allah, and they ask Allah alone, in which case, most of the time what you're dealing with is you're dealing with a bid'ah, an innovation. Is that going to places where Allah never told you to go to make dua to Him, and seeking out nearness to Allah in a way that Allah never told you to seek out nearness. But for the majority, that's not the case. They go to the grave and say, Ya Abdul Qadir, ask Allah for me. So their first call is not Allah, answer my dua. It is, Ya Abdul Qadir, take my dua to Allah. Ya Abdul Qadir, intercede for me with Allah. And this is the exact shirk that the mushrikeen of Quraysh used to do. And there is no difference at all in it. So don't let anyone confuse you with that and say, if they're asking the person in the grave, believing the person in the grave can benefit them, that this is shirk. And if they believe that the person in the grave is just an intermediary between them and Allah, this is not shirk. This is the same shirk that the people of Quraysh used to do. وَيَقُولُونَ هَؤُلَاءِ شُفَعَاؤُنَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُونَا إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى. They say, these are our intercessors with Allah. We only worship them to make us near to Allah in position. These three are the biggest shubuhat that they have, and we covered them last lesson. Therefore, if you haven't covered the general answer and you still don't feel confident about it, I would go back 2 lessons. If you haven't covered the 3 major issues that they have, the 3 strongest shubuhat that they have, that was last lesson. Please do go back and cover it, inshallah. And the purpose behind that is so that you are ready to go on to the next section, which are the shubuhat, which are aysaru minha. They're easier to deal with. They're easier to deal with. And we're going to take our first one, فَإِنْ قَالَ.
فإن قال أنا لا أعبد إلا الله وهذا التجاء إليهم ودعاؤهم ليس بعبادة فقل له أنت تقرأ أن الله افترض عليك إخلاص العبادة لله وهو حقه عليك، فإذا قال نعم فقل له تبين لي هذا الذي فرض عليك وهو إخلاص العبادة لله وحده وهو حقه عليك، فإن كان لا يعرف العبادة ولا أنواعها فبينها له بقولك قال الله تعالى عدوا ربكم تضرعا وخفيا إنه لا يحب المعتدين. فإذا أعلمته بهذا فقل له هل علمت هذا عبادة لله؟ فلا بد أن يقول نعم والدعاء مخ العبادة. فقل له إذا أقررت أنها عبادة ودعوت الله ليلا ونهارا خوفا وطمعا ثم دعوت في تلك الحاجة نبيا أو غيره هل أشركت في عبادة الله غيره؟ فلا بد أن يقول نعم.
Now if he says, I only worship Allah, but this turning that I do to these pious people and saints, and my calling upon them for my needs is not considered worship, then respond to him as follows. Do you agree that Allah has made it obligatory for you to single him out and worship, and that this worship is sole right, and thus cannot be directed to any other object? So when he responds, yes, then ask him, explain to me this concept that Allah has made obligatory on you, meaning the sincerity that you must have to him in your worship, and which is his sole right. Then you will see that he does not know the meaning of worship, nor is he familiar with its categories. Now that he has shown his ignorance, you explain it to him by quoting the verse in which Allah says, call upon your Lord in humility and fear. Once you have explained this verse to him, ask him, is this calling and dua a type of worship to Allah? Then he must absolutely respond, yes, dua is a type of worship. So ask him, if you admit that this dua is an act of worship, and you called upon Allah day and night in fear of having your dua rejected and hopeful of a response from him, but then at the same time called upon a prophet or other than a prophet to respond to the request that you made to Allah, did you by this action commit shirk with Allah? Then he must absolutely respond, yes.
Here the Shaykh begins a new Shubha, and the Shaykh doesn't consider this to be from the three major Shubuhāt that they have. This is one of the smaller ones. However, this is one we're going to take a little time on because it's very, very common in our time. And I actually, in the beginning, I said that you could even consider this to be a fourth of the four major, you could make it four major Shubuhāt they have. But upon reflection, I realized and I thought, this Shubha is not at all strong by itself. It only becomes strong when they link it to the first Shubha that the Shaykh mentioned. So what I mean by that is, this Shubha, what is this Shubha all about? This Shubha is all about the meaning of ibadah. This Shubha is all around ta'arifu al-ibadah, the meaning of ibadah and the definition of ibadah. And this has become in our time a very powerful shubha that has confused a lot of people. And there's quite a lot of even graduates from some of the Islamic universities and so on who are propagating this shubha widely and have become completely and utterly confused by it, which is the shubha around the meaning of ibadah. That what these people are doing is not considered to be ibadah. I was going to say that you should consider this to be a big shubha because it's very common in our time. But actually, when you think about it, it has no weight to it at all unless it is combined with the first shubha. And that is that the issue of limiting ibadah to rububiyyah, or limiting shirk to rububiyyah. And that's the essence of it. So really, yes, there is in our time a very, very common shubha which is being passed around, and we're going to talk about some examples of it, and we're going to really try and give some really clear examples, even though it needs more detail. And I think Sheikh Abdulrahman has been doing with his advanced class on the weekends. He has been doing a book which I believe he has prepared on the topic of the meaning of ibadah. That's well worth attending, well worth reading. Al-Allama Al-Muallimi rahimahullah ta'ala, his amazing book Raf' al-Ishtibah, removing the confusion around the meaning of al-ibadah and al-ilah. And Al-Muallimi, no doubt, absolutely destroyed the shubha. He destroyed it to the point that by the grace of Allah, nobody can even have a word to say about it after they read that book. However, since these shubahat don't die, Al-Muallimi rahimahullah ta'ala wrote his book فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. The people who had this confusion and they were using it to propagate shirk among the people, this all died after that. But what happened after that is some people came along and they thought that they would revive this dead horse and put a bit of something different into it. So all they did is they combined between the first shubha that the Shaykh mentions, that is the shubha that we don't make shirk because we believe that Allah is our Khaliq, and the shubha around the meaning of ibadah, and they put them both together and they came up with version, I would say 2.0, but it's probably more like 10.0, which is to do with the meaning of ibadah requiring to have some aspect of rububiyyah to it. In other words, a person who does these actions without any single issue in rububiyyah is not a mushrik. And there is no doubt that that is already what the Shaykh has answered, and the answer of Al-Allama Al-Muallimi rahimahullah ta'ala has only increased it in clarity, and so on and so forth. However, let's just start by looking at what the Shaykh said, because the Shaykh here is dealing with a simpler issue, which is simply just the simple response that I only worship Allah. I only worship Allah. This turning to them and making dua to them is not ibadah. Now the Shaykh starts with something very powerful, and this is a muqaddimah. You have to have it. You can't answer this question without it. And that is to stop and say to the person, do you affirm, therefore, from what you've said, I've understood that you affirm that it is obligatory that you worship Allah alone? Do you agree with me on that? Because you said my dua is not ibadah. Okay? Before we go any further, can I just clarify from your statement, my dua is not ibadah, can I clarify that what you mean by that is that ibadah has to be only for Allah, and that this is what Allah has made obligatory on you, and this is Allah's right over you? So, if this person says yes, and by the way, if they say no, then we are back to which one? We need to go back. We need to go back to explain to them the obligation of worshipping Allah alone. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We only created the jinn and man to worship me alone. This explaining to them that ibadah is only for Allah, that ibadah or worship is only for Allah, that is if they turn around to you and say to you, no, hold on, who said ibadah is only for Allah? So we first have to establish that you and I both agree that ibadah is only for Allah. you and I both agree that ibadah is only for Allah. If you agree that, but you are now saying to me that your dua to those pious people, the awliya, is not ibadah. So have we both got an understanding now? Ibadah is only for Allah, and your dua is not ibadah. Then say, explain to me, what is it that Allah has made obligatory for you? What is the meaning of worshipping Allah alone, which is Allah's right over you? And if the person doesn't know what ibadah is, nor do they know the types of ibadah, then explain them to him with your statement. So here the Shaykh is saying the expectation is, the problem here, what are you expecting the person to say? You're not expecting them to argue that worship is for Allah. That worship is for Allah. Ya ayyuhan nas, Ya ayyuhan nas u'budu rabbakum. Ya ayyuhan nas u'budu rabbakum. الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. فلا تجعلوا لله أندادا وأنتم تعلمون. The first command in the Qur'an and the first prohibition in the Qur'an. Worship your Lord and don't make any partner with him. So this idea that the person says, no, hold on, I don't believe that ibadah is only for Allah. I don't believe worship is only for Allah. This is rare. But if you have it, it's easy to go back to the primer the Shaykh gave you and deal with this from the beginning. The belief of Quraysh and so on, talking about the states of Jahiliyyah and everything we've covered up to now. More likely is the person says, yes, I agree with you. Ibadah is only for Allah, but what I am doing is not ibadah. Then say to them, and this is a powerful way of debating with someone. Instead of answering immediately, say to them, okay, what is your mafhum of ibadah? How do you understand ibadah? Tell me.